Hi guys. Okay, so I've been asked about breathing. So as you know, any of you that come to my regular classes, we do box breathing, we do abdominal breathing or diaphragm breathing, but there are loads of different styles of breathing. Obviously with yoga there's ujjayi breathing, is your classic breathing, but in a nutshell, as long as you're not holding your breath, that's kind of the main thing. We do tend to hold a breath sometimes when we're concentrating or when we're in a challenging pose. So what I've decided to do, rather than kind of do this in an actual class, so I'm kind of stopping the class, this is going to be about a 15-minute video tutorial just on everything I know about breathing, all the mechanics of it, how it affects our central nervous system, how it affects our pH, how it affects our actual mechanics of the body in terms of strength, of the core, for example. And I'm just going to go through all the tidbits of information that I've picked up over the years in terms of breathing. And hopefully you'll kind of find bits that will be quite useful or quite informative. So I'm going to start. I've got a little check sheet here because I'm useless at remembering everything, as you know. So I'm going to make sure that I tick all the points that I wanted to go through with you. And I'm going to start off just working on breathing and our central nervous system. So if you think of our central nervous system, it's like we've got a computer up here that controls everything, and then our body is the machine, the mechanics of the machine, everything moves around. And our central nervous system can be divided into two. It's our sympathetic side of our central nervous system, our kind of subconscious, things that happen without us really being aware of it. Our brain just does that for us. And then we've got our parasympathetic or our conscious side of our brain, which is where we've got control, where we kind of, our logical state takes effect. And as a species, humans are one of the only species, I think dolphins might be another, but there's not many species on the planet that have actually got the ability to control or not control breathing. So we can just go through our day without thinking about our breathing, and we breathe. We don't have to keep reminding ourselves to breathe, we just breathe. Or we can sit down in a yoga class and we can do a specific style of breathing, a specific exercise, or we can even hold our breath or speed our breath up. So we've got this ability to take control of our breathing whenever we want to. And one of the benefits of that is when we start to think about our breathing, or when we take control of our breathing, we actually start to move into our parasympathetic side of our central nervous system. It's something that's happening, it's like a two-way street. And that's where we actually feel better, we work much better, our brain thrives more when it's in our parasympathetic part of our central nervous system. It feels safer, it's our kind of rest and digest mode, it's our thrive mode. Everything feels more effective, your thinking is clearer, you're not in an emotional state, you're more relaxed, you're calmer. And the benefit is, on the physical side of it, is when we're working our parasympathetic, when we're thinking about our breathing, is it also has this kind of calming effect on our stress levels. It reduces our anxiety, for example. So it's a really useful tool to have. It's just knowing that physically breathing, exercises, taking control of our breathing, being aware of your breathing can actually help our mental state, our emotional state, as well as our physical. When we're not thinking about our breathing, when we're just letting our kind of brain do it in the background, things will affect it. So for example, posture, if you're slouched and slumped, the pressure on the diaphragm, for example, is going to have a huge impact on how you can breathe, whether you can breathe big, deep, steady breaths, or whether you're going to be breathing short, shallow breaths. It also has an effect on our mental state. So for example, if you're rushing around and your breathing's elevated, your breathing might accelerate up. It's going to fire you up into your subconscious, your sympathetic state, which is where we also get this kind of fight, flight, freeze mode. So it can actually start to make you feel quite anxious, even if you've got no reason to be, just because you've got poor breathing technique going on. You're in bad posture, or you're rushing around. So there's lots of things that we can do to kind of take control and to use our breathing to actually change our mental state, our physical state, and our emotional state. Now, when it comes to movement, I'm going to show you the mechanics of breathing. So if you think about our kind of mechanisms, if you like, we've got two big lungs, like two big bags. We fill them with air, we empty them. And to do that, we've got this big sheet of muscle, the diaphragm muscle, which kind of attaches, I almost think like an upside down, like an umbrella inside the body. And as we breathe in, the diaphragm draws down, so it allows all this breath to get pulled into our lungs, and our lungs fill up. So when we breathe in, our diaphragm pulls down, our lungs inflate, we get oxygen into our lungs. When we breathe out, the diaphragm pushes up, so it helps to push the breath out of the lungs, and we empty, we get rid of all that used breath, that carbon dioxide. So we empty the breath as we exhale. So we inhale, we fill the lungs with loads of oxygenated breath. we exhale, we empty the lungs of all that carbonised breath. So that's my basic breathing mechanism. But another thing, when we breathe in, we tap into our subconscious a little bit, our sympathetic nervous system. So you'll notice the difference. Even if you're just sitting there now, all I want you to do is just take a deep breath in and notice what happens. We kind of get this feeling of lifting or tensing or energising the body. It's our preparation for action, basically. So when we breathe in, we move into our subconscious part of our brain, our sympathetic part of our central nervous system, our fight, flight and freeze mode, because that's what we do. If you imagine if you're about to run away from danger or if someone's about to attack you, the last thing you do would be to take a deep breath in, ready for action. Yeah, so this inhale is a kind of preparation for something, and it can often be a preparation for something that's a threat to us, for moving away from something. Or if you think about someone gives you bad news, for example, you would take a deep breath, a gasp of breath inwards. So it is linked into that part of our thinking, our kind of state. So breathing in charges us up with energy, it charges us up, it prepares the body for action. It also, when we breathe in, we kind of brace into our diaphragm, don't we? We kind of get this kind of engagement of our diaphragm muscle. And our diaphragm is linked into what we call our inner unit. So if you think about our core, we know core strength, these deep muscles which give us our power and our support from within. But our inner unit, similar to our core, we've got our diaphragm is the top part, our pelvic floor is the bottom part, so think top and bottom, and then our abdominal muscles, our abdominal wall at the front, and then our back muscles. And if you think these 4 sections of muscle, if you like, help to give our body strength and structure and control. So if that's working effectively, we've got a good strong core, we've got a good foundation for movement, protection for the spine, protection for our internal organs as well. If even one part of that isn't working effectively though, whether it's your pelvic floor, your diaphragm, your abs or your back, the whole thing's weak. So when we talk about strengthening our core, strengthening our inner unit, we need to strengthen our diaphragm as well. We need to have an effective, efficient diaphragm. And we do that with breathing exercises, with deep abdominal breathing, or just being aware of it. So a deep breath in, we inhale, our diaphragm draws down, so we're kind of activating that, and it's preparing our body for movement. We're filling our body with oxygen. When we exhale, when we breathe out, the opposite happens. And as we breathe out, the diaphragm kind of pushes upwards, and we get this feeling of kind of releasing tension or releasing pressure from the body. So as we exhale, we have that feeling of releasing and softening the body. And when we breathe out, we tap into our parasympathetic part of our central nervous system. So again, that's where we feel more relaxed, more comfortable. It's that release, isn't it? When we sigh, we take a deep breath in, relief, and it's that outward breath that allows our body to relax. It puts us into that calmer state of mind. So breathing in that way can really affect our emotional state, our mental state. But the mechanics of it when we're moving, so I'm going to talk you through, for example, a moving pose that would involve me needing a little bit of power, for example. So I'm going to move from a basic box position up into a downward facing dog. So I'm in my box position, I'm going to take a deep breath in, so I'm oxygenating my body. And as I exhale, and then I'm going to push myself up into my downward dog. And as I'm holding that pose now, I'm just going to breathe easy. But the exhale part of the breath kind of gives me that feeling of moving into it. It gives me that feeling of release or pushing into the pose. So there's no right or wrong when it comes to movement and how you cue it, whether you inhale or exhale in the movement. A lot of styles of yoga will tell you there's different styles of yoga that will tell you should inhale here, exhale there. I've studied several different styles over the year, and some of them say that you should breathe in on this point, some of you say you should breathe out. My personal opinion is you do what's comfortable for you, what feels natural for you, and what feels easy for you. So do play around with the poses. Having said that, there's certain parts of the movement where we might need a little bit of extra power, where it's a good idea to take that deep breath in, and then as we exhale, we kind of hold, or we move into that we tense our diaphragm muscle, so we hold the pose. So I'm going to give you another example now of doing something like an abdominal peel. So take a deep breath in, and as I start to move down, I'm breathing out. And then I'm going to take a deep breath in again. I'm going to pause halfway. And I'm going to carry on moving on the exhale. So that exhale gives us that little bit of extra control on the movement. You sometimes would see it in martial arts as well. So for example, if I was going to throw a punch in martial arts, I'd take a breath in, I'd exhale and I'd power into it. Because my exhale gives me a bit more power. I'm bracing into my diaphragm as I exhale, and I'm getting that extra kind of oomph behind it. So often you see in martial arts, sometimes you'll see people will be quite noisy with the breath as well. That exertion of air will come with a sound, and it's creating that sound that's also helping to engage into these core muscles. So sometimes breathing big on the exhale, or kind of using a noisy breath, pushing out, can help to tense. It gives you a little bit more support in your core. So that kind of moves me on to styles of breathing like Ujjayi breath. So Ujjayi breath in yoga is quite a noisy breath. You know, it's a breath where we breathe in and out through the nose, but we're trying to draw the breath in past the nasal passage, and we get this kind of whooshing sound, this whooshing sensation. And the benefit of Ujjayi breathing is it does tend to keep the diaphragm in a bit more of a tense state, so it's powering us up from the inside, if you like. So I'm going to give you a quick demonstration. Hopefully my mic will pick up the sound of me breathing. So I'm going to start with just me breathing easy, just me breathing normally through my nose or through my mouth. So I'm going to inhale. Just breathing easy, just taking a deep breath in through the nose, exhaling through the mouth. And that's a fine way of breathing. It's a good way of breathing. I've got a nice deep breath. I can feel the breath moving into my abdomen. I'm trying not to breathe shallow. Just one more little point. Any style of breathing that you do, we really want to avoid this shallow breathing, this kind of upper body breathing. That's linked into this kind of stress state. And the knock-on effect of that is it can tense all these muscles up anyway. So it's not a good idea to be a shallow chest breather. We want to breathe more abdominally, rib cage if possible. But just normal breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. You often see that in Pilates style classes. Great way of breathing. Ujjayi breath, on the other hand, we're going to inhale and exhale just through the nose. So obviously you wouldn't do this if you've got a blocked nose. So I'm going to give you a quick demonstration. Okay, so you can hopefully hear it's quite a raspy noise. So what I'm not doing, I'm not sniffing the breath in. That's me sniffing the breath, kind of pulling it into my nostrils, and I can feel it in my nostrils as I breathe that in. With Ujjayi breath, you try and almost bypass your nasal passage, your nostrils, and bring it to the back of the throat. So it's like a gulp. It's like I'm drawing the breath in, and I'm trying to hit the part of my throat where you swallow. If you just swallow a couple of times, you feel that quite deep down here, our kind of swallow reflex. Imagine when you're breathing, you're trying to pull that breath to that place rather than bring it to the back of the nasal passage. So I'm pulling my breath quite deep down into my throat. And to do that, again, I'm bracing into my diaphragm to get that pull of breath. And the same as I breathe out, I'm trying to push the breath out through my windpipe. So one of the benefits of Ujjayi breathing is obviously it kind of gives you this little bit more strength gain in our diaphragm muscle, which can help with big movements or movements that you find challenging, like moving up to a downward dog, or pushing up into a cobra, for example, or pushing into a plank pose, or just holding a big pose. So Ujjayi breath there can be quite useful, taking those big deep breaths and drawing in. One of the things that can affect our breathing in terms of movement though is flexion and extension through the body. So if you think about these mechanics going on, as I'm breathing in, my diaphragm is trying to draw down so I can fill my lungs fully. As I breathe out, my diaphragm is trying to lift up so I can empty my lungs. Now, if I'm just in an upright position, that's fine. I've got all this room here. But if I'm in a yoga pose, so for example, a forward fold, where I'm flexed, it's actually going to be very difficult for me to take that deep abdominal breath because I'm squashing everything around here. I'm putting compression onto this area. So my breathing is probably going to be a little bit more upper body, a little bit more shallow. But things that can help with moving into that. So if you think for example, I'm going to take a deep breath in. So I'm filling my lungs up first. So then as I move into my forward fold and I exhale, so I'm breathing out, my diaphragm's getting out of the way, and I'm not squashing it. I'm giving my breath space, if you like. So as I fold my body into flexion, I'm doing it on an exhale when my diaphragm is already lifted out of the way, so I'm not affecting that. Otherwise, if you see what happens here, I'm going to do the reverse now. So I'm going to take a deep breath in, I'm going to exhale, then I'm going to move into my fold, And then I'm going to try and take a deep breath in the fold, and it's going to be a little bit more comfortable now, uncomfortable, because I've already kind of squashed this space up. I've already given my diaphragm less room to move in. So sometimes when you're moving into a folding pose, it's nice to take that big breath in first, exhale as you move into it. So you've taken that really nice filling up of the lungs, we've got the diaphragm out of the way, and then we can hold the pose and just breathe easy while we're in there. So that's why sometimes in poses you get this kind of cueing of take a deep breath in, exhale, move into the pose, exhale, fold yourself, or exhale, kind of brace into the pose. So again, that is just a case of you playing around with what works best for you. But if you think about the mechanics, so when we're squashing our body, folding our body, closing our body, maybe doing a knee hug, yeah, we want to take a deep breath in, exhale, pull the legs a little bit closer in, and then we can just hold it comfortably and just breathe easy once we're into that position. Okay, so do play around with what works for you. Another quick one that I'll show you is your cat and dog. So obviously here we're rounding up. Inhale and exhale. I like to do both. I like to take a deep breath in, round up. Exhale, deep breath in. Exhale as I open out into it. But it really is a case of just finding what works for you, just finding what feels comfortable for you. Other things that can affect it is proportions. I've got quite a long spine, so I've got a good distance between my rib cage and my pelvic girdle. So, you know, I've got space here for my diaphragm to move. If you've got quite a short body, like if you've got, you know, quite a short spine, you haven't even got as much room. So when we're doing these flexions, these deep folds, these closing in of the body, you're going to find that compression factor is going to be even more of an indicator as to how comfortable you are with your breathing. So you might need to kind of think about that as well. Now, one other thing with our breathing is obviously this feeling of release of tension. So we know that when we breathe out, we tap into our parasympathetic, the body feels relaxed. That's a good way of using our breath again to release our body's natural tendency to kind of clench. You know, sometimes, especially if we're new to yoga or we're new to a movement, the movement might feel quite scary to do. So we move into a twist, for example, and you might think, oh, that feels quite challenging. I've got a lot of tension there. And your body's tendency, when it feels a little bit of discomfort, is to start clenching. It does it anyway. Any stretch, the first few seconds of a stretch, we've got this thing called a stretch reflex action. So when we first move into a stretch, your body will naturally tighten the muscles gently. It's trying to stop you from injuring yourself, basically. It's trying to stop you from tearing and overstretching. So those first few seconds of any stretch, your body's gently fighting you. It's just giving you that little bit of a safety net. After a few seconds, it then realises, okay, you're doing this on purpose. I'm going to let you go a little deeper into that stretch so we can go further. But we can use our breath to help even more with that. So, for example, I've taken my breath in, I've moved to my forward fold. This is my first level. I can feel the stretch there. My body's gone a little bit, oh, that feels quite tight. Let's just pause there for a moment. As I'm holding it still, my brain's realising, okay, we're not injuring, this is all okay, we're safe. So I'm going to use my exhale now. I'm going to take a deep breath in. And as I breathe out, I'm allowing my body to go a little deeper into that stretch, and I'm trying to get the feeling that my muscles are softening and unclenching. Yeah, they're not trying to fight me, they're trying to go with me. And the exhale part of the breath is a useful tool to use there, because we naturally have that feeling of release when we breathe out. So using that as well with your poses, when you're in a pose, if you're going to hold the pose a little bit longer perhaps, or if you're working on getting deeper into a pose, think about the exhale as a release button, yeah? That it's allowing your body to go further into it and to go further into it more comfortably. Same with relaxation. If you're doing a relaxation technique, your breathing's very useful to focus on. As we know, deep relaxation or meditation even, in its simplest terms, it's just the feeling of the state of clearing the mind or thinking about something very simplistic. And what's more simple than our breath? You know, we carry it with us all the time, so it's something you can tap into. And you can focus on things like the noise of the breath. For example, for Ujjayi breathing, we've got that raspy, whooshing noise as we inhale and exhale. So you could focus on the sound of the breath, trying to make it louder, the pace of the breath, trying to make it bigger. But all these things will start to tap you into the parasympathetic part of your central nervous system again. Yeah, remember what I said at the beginning about how we are one of the only species that can control our breathing. And when we do take control over our breathing, we start to feel safer, the body starts to work more efficiently, everything, all the systems just come online and they just work better. One other thing that I want to go into with breathing is the effect it has on our pH. So our body's naturally got this kind of natural pH around the systems. Our breathing can massively affect that. When we're breathing stressy breath, short, shallow breathing, or we're cold, or we're in bad posture, or anything that puts us away from deep, natural, big breath into this short, kind of rapid breathing, it can start to affect the pH of the body. It can actually start to change the pH of our body and make us more acidic, which will have a knock-on effect. The red blood cells become stickier. They hold on to that oxygen molecule. So even though you're getting loads of oxygen in, your red blood cells are holding on to the oxygen molecule so firmly that it's not actually becoming effective. It's going around the body and it won't release it as easily. So that can also have an effect on your energy levels, concentration levels, for example. Things like cramping, we sometimes, if we haven't got enough oxygen getting to the body, it can trigger off cramps. So being aware that our breathing can affect not just our physical mechanics, the muscles, the tension there, not just our mental state, but it can also affect the state of our energy levels. So it's a really important factor to be aware of, that breathing can affect that. So again, we can use that if you've really run down, if you're really lethargic, just spending a couple of minutes doing some breathing exercises, some deep abdominal breathing, getting that breath nice, deep, nice and steady, so we're properly oxygenating our body. We're getting the body to use the breath as it's designed to, which is big, deep breaths. And deep breathing, again, just coming back to the mechanics of the breathing. So our lungs, if you think about our lungs, big bags, but the lower lobes, the lower part of the lungs, is actually where our breathing is more effective. So if we can get the breath into the lower, which we only do when we take a deep breath, that's where the oxygen exchange actually takes place much more effectively. So it's another reason to try and get away from this short, shallow breathing. It's like you're only half filling the lungs when you're doing that short, shallow breath. We're not getting the breath fully down into the lungs where the oxygen exchange takes place. The body gets hold of that oxygen, it uses it, and it kind of makes the whole system work more effectively. So hopefully, let me just check that I've gone through everything. I'm just going to go through box breathing with you, because that's the style of breathing that we do, that I try and get you to do in my classes anyway. So anyone that's not familiar with that, if you've got a few more minutes, I'm just going to quickly explain that to you. But yeah, breathing's it's a really important thing. It's just something that we kind of take for granted, and a lot of people say, well, why would you need to be taught how to breathe? Yes, we should naturally just breathe. When we're born, the first thing we do is start to breathe. Babies breathe brilliantly. If you look at a baby when it's asleep, its whole belly expands, and we've got this huge amount of movement. As adults, we tend to get a bit less effective at breathing. Things like sitting in chairs, slouching, compression, so that affects our breathing. Wearing tight clothing can affect our breathing. Being stressed out, if you're constantly in a state of stress, you're going to basically train your body to use that kind of breathing all the time. It will become its natural way of breathing instead of deep abdominal breath. Your natural way, your default position, will be short, rapid breathing, which isn't great for us really. It's okay for short periods, don't get me wrong. Quick, rapid breathing is good if we need a sudden burst of energy. If we're running for a bus, the breathing will speed up, that's great. But we want it to recover quick. It's another indicator of how fit you are cardiovascular wise, is not how much breathing you do. So getting out of breath isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just how quickly you recover from getting out of breath is actually the indicator as to how well all your respiratory system's working. So push yourself when you're exercising. We want to get out of breath, we want to, rapid, big breathing. But it's that recovery rate that you need to be looking at in terms of how fit your lungs are, how fit your respiratory system is. You should be able to recover reasonably quickly from breathing big and rapid. So it's that ability to control the breathing, knowing the mechanics there, breathing big and breathing deep. So box breathing that I do in my classes, you can do this any position. I'm just going to quickly whiz you through it, reclined. So think about your breath in. So we inhale fully through the nose or the mouth, whatever feels comfortable. And we're trying to get this feeling of expanding the lungs fully from bottom to top. Rib cage expands, abdominal muscles expand. When we've taken that full breath, we want to pause for a moment. We just want to give the body a chance to grab the oxygen. If we breathe out too quickly, we've shown the body the oxygen, but we haven't actually given it a chance to take it. So we take a deep breath in and we pause. And the pause is very important. Yeah, so pause as long as you comfortably can. When you need to, you're then going to exhale. And you're going to try and empty the lungs fully. So we really use that exhale to get rid of all that breath. Just because we want to make use of this space. We want the lung capacity to be usable. We don't want it to still be half full of carbon dioxide that we've not breathed out properly. So think of your exhale as empty and getting rid of all that used breath. And then we pause at the end of the exhale. So it's a deep breath in, a pause, a deep exhale, and a pause. And you'll find that just by focusing on those 4 parts, your breathing will start to get slow. You don't have to count the breath. It will naturally start to slow down because the breath becomes more efficient. We're getting more oxygen. The brain's aware of that, so it will slow the breathing rate down. Big breath is better than small, rapid breath. And also another little thing with deep breathing, why I quite like box breathing in particular. It's called box breathing. Another way of looking at it is imagine you're breathing around the inside of a box. So we inhale up one side, we pause as we go along the top, we exhale down the other side of the box, we pause as we go along the bottom. So we're breathing around a box and we're trying to make that box bigger, yeah? So each part of the breath gets bigger. So that's why it's sometimes referred to as box breathing, because we're trying to gradually deepen and expand our breath. And the effect it will have will be to slow down your breathing rate as well. You know, we're designed to breathe, I think humans are designed to breathe about 11, 12 breaths per minute is our natural breathing rate. That's an average. Nowadays, most people are probably breathing more around 17, 18 breaths a minute because we're stressed out, we're rushing around all the time. So it changes our natural way of breathing. Just to give you an example of how we can change our breathing, we can kind of train our breathing. Free divers, people that dive without snorkels, without equipment, I think the world record's up to around 6 or 7 minutes. So if you imagine taking one breath in 6 or 7 minutes, so that's how we can actually train our breathing system to become really effective. A good rate of breathing is around 6 breaths a minute. So if we can slow our breathing rate down, which often happens when we're asleep, or if we're really in a deep state of meditation, we can slow our breathing rate right down to around 6 breaths a minute, or even less than that if you can work on it. 6 breaths a minute has been shown to be the optimal breathing pace. There was a study done about 10 or probably 15 years ago now, actually. It was about 10 years ago that I did the course on this, so it's probably more like 15, maybe even 20 years ago. A German scientist and a breathing expert, they did a 10-year study on breathing styles and techniques, and they discovered that the 6-second breathing, so you inhale for 6 seconds, you exhale for 6 seconds, actually activates part of our brain that are the same when we've got pain relief in our system. So it can have the same effect on our pain levels as taking a pain-killing drug. It had the same impact. It calms the body down, it releases the muscles, it releases these feel-good endorphins, the same way that drugs can do. So breathing can be hugely powerful, if we use it correctly. So that's your 6-second breathing technique as well. If you're interested in that, Google coherent breathing. There's a whole study done on it, and that will give you some more information. Or send me a link and I'll try and send you the information on that. So obviously doing our controlled breathing, doing it in a state where you're quiet and calm is good, because if we learn to do it, then we can tap into it when we are stressed out. We can start to use it when we need it. But it's a great way, and even just 10 seconds of taking control of our breathing will start to pull you out of your stressy part of your brain, your sympathetic fight, flight, freeze mode, and start to put you into your calm, logical thinking, human part of your brain. So even just 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds of simple breathing exercises will start to have that effect on you. And it will start to release that tension from the muscles. Really good thing to do late at night if you struggle to get to sleep at night. One of the things that our brain needs to sleep properly is to know that it's safe. And if we're breathing short and shallow, our muscles are slightly tight. Because of that, if we're breathing rapidly, your brain is saying, okay, well, you might be tired and you might be trying to get to sleep, but the body's telling you something different. The breathing's rapid, the muscles are slightly tense, therefore we must be in danger. So we're going to stay alert. We're going to keep you slightly awake. We're not going to let you get into that really nice deep sleep. And then you're going to be the kind of sleeper that just wakes up for you're waking up at the slightest noise or, the slightest movement, and you're not getting that proper deep sleep. You're not waking up feeling like you've had that deep sleep. So breathing exercises can be hugely beneficial on our sleeping state as well. If you're not a good sleeper, try doing some deep abdominal breathing before you go to bed, and link it with that feeling of release, progressive relaxation. We use the breath, we take a deep breath in, we clench, we exhale, and we let go. So you're kind of manually getting rid of that tension in the body. It's another way of really working with that. I'm just trying to think if I've given you all the points that I want. I'm sure I'll think of something afterwards, so I might give you another shout out on this one in one of my sessions, or do another video. But if you have got any questions, or if there's anything that you think I might have missed, or any feedback, I find breathing a fascinating subject. It's just so huge when you look into it. It can have so many positive effects on the way that we work and the way that our bodies work. But it can also have the negative. You know, if we're getting it inherently wrong a lot of the time, it can have a knock-on effect. It can start to change things. So it is worth being aware of your breathing. But in terms of breathing and movement in a yoga class, most important thing is to make sure that you're not holding your breath, trying to breathe big and easy and deep. Find a style of breathing that suits you. Working with the inhale, the exhale, play around. Golden rule is as we exhale, we tend to brace a little bit into our diaphragm, so we've got a bit more power, a bit more control. So that might be a good time to move into those big poses. Also, as we exhale, we release the tension from the muscles. So if you're trying to get deeper into a stretch, use the exhale to push further into it, to get that next little step. When we're getting ready for a movement, for example, if you're going to do an explosive movement, you would want to inhale to power up. Make sure you're taking that big breath in first. But do play around with the breathing, see what works for you. Notice, what feels comfortable. Forward movements, extension movements, even twisting movements. Obviously, we're going to have a physical effect on our mechanisms here. Breathing big. One last thing I've just remembered. Rib cage, it's a mobile structure. We've got all these little muscles between our ribs. It's part bone, part cartilage. It should be a mobile structure. If we're never using big breathing, if we're never stretching and expanding our rib cage, all these muscles are going to start to get tight and fixed, and it'll actually affect other areas. It will affect your movement through the trunk. So breathing exercises, breathing big, abdominal breathing, taking the hands onto the rib cage, doing some big exaggerated breaths. That as well is actually a nice way of mobilising and stretching out this structure. So think about that as another useful thing that you can do, is using your breathing exercises to stretch the muscles, the connective tissue, little intercostal muscles, and also to just get your diaphragm bigger. Like any muscle, if we work it through its full range, it gets more supple and it gets stronger. So by taking big breaths, we're stretching and expanding and contracting our diaphragm. So the diaphragm itself becomes a more efficient muscle. It becomes better at doing its job. Every muscle needs to be strong and supple to work properly, and that includes our diaphragm as well. So I hope you've enjoyed that. As always, I've gone over. I was going to do about 10-15 minutes, so I do apologise. I hope you've got a cup of tea while you're watching this, and let me know if there's anything else you want me to rant about in a video. Thanks, guys.